Hey guys! So now we're getting into one of my favorite things in the world. Oh my gosh. Okay. Romanticism, realism, photography. Oh, that's my thing. Europe and America 1800 to 1870. So here we're seeing some first examples of photography and famous photographers. So cool. Okay, here we've got a lot of learning objectives. So if you want a screen cap, a lot going on here. Again, sorry for all the content, but we're going to cover it. And here's the timeline. And again, so much going on here. Okay. Here is the Napoleonic Empire. Oh boy, was he a big boss. Goodness gracious. We're going to see a lot more about him. And Europe around 1850. It's interesting to see how things have stayed the same and how they have changed. Okay, so here we have Antoine Jean Gros, Napoleon visiting the plague-stricken in Jaffa. Okay. Wow. All right, so this is big. The emphasis of suffering and Gros's Napoleon visiting the plague-stricken in Jaffa, as well as the detailed depiction of the exotic locale, presages the turn to the new style of Romanticism. Napoleon Bonaparte was named the first consul of the French Republic after leading the French army on several campaigns. So Jaffa, that's like Greece. So again, going back to Greco-Roman. And again, it looks almost like the Parthenon, doesn't it? Pierre-Alexandre Barthélemy Vignon. Vignon's neoclassical design of the Church of La Madeleine in Paris is meant to tie the empire of Napoleon to the Roman Empire. Okay. Here we got Jacques-Louis David again. This is Napoleon crossing the St. Bernard Pass. This is still affecting artists today. This artwork, it's huge. The painter of the French Revolution who was able to revitalize his career by becoming first painter to Napoleon is Jacques-Louis David. And again, Jacques-Louis David, one of his paintings for Napoleon, his coronation. Ooh, it's got to look big and fancy, right? Antonio Canova, Cupid and Psyche. Okay, so we're still going back to those Greco-Roman myths and the era. Oh, here's another Napoleon. That little guy, look at how tiny he looks with all those clothes on. So this is Jean-Auguste Dominique Ingres. Oh, we're going to talk more about him. He's neoclassical, an artist of the first part of the 19th century, so that is early 1800s, who looked firmly to the arts of Greek antiquity for his subjects and compositions, is Jean-Auguste Dominique Ingres. This is Antonio Canova's Pauline Borghese as Venus Victorious. Okay, so Borghese, what a rich family. The neoclassical portrait statue of Paulina Borghese in the guise of Venus was created by sculptor Antonio Canova. Okay, this is Anne-Louis Guerre de Triosson, Burial of Atala. So, you know, we're going back again to classical themes. Anne-Louis Guerre de Triosson, Jean-Baptiste Belly. Finally, we get to see someone of color, right? Okay, Jean-Auguste Dominique Ingres. His apotheosis of Homer, which is this painting, was inspired by the earlier work of Raphael. School of Athens. Ooh, I see an awesome comparison idea for a paper there. Ingres Apotheosis of Homer is not a colorist painting, instead relying on form and line, which is, you know, I guess what they're saying is the colors are not as bright and pronounced, and it's more about form and line. Okay, that's fine. I honestly see color, form, line, you know, space, value, everything here. Okay, big artwork here. So Jean-Auguste Dominique Ingres, this is probably his most famous that I know of. Grand Odalisque. So the elongated limbs and torso of Ingres's Grand Odalisque can be linked to the earlier artist and style, Parmigianino, remember little cheese, and mannerism. So that was like right after the Renaissance. But again, you know, great comparison idea. Okay, here is John Henry Fuseli. So finally we've got like an English guy. One of the Romantic artists who depict the dark terrain of the subconscious is John Henry Fuseli. Okay, so now we're getting into philosophy, psychology, psychiatry. So apparently this woman is dreaming of, you know, monsters attacking her. Okay, William Blake's Ancient of Days, another super famous artwork. The romantic notion of God as a mathematician seen in Blake's Ancient of Days is taken from the artistic tradition of the earlier medieval period, always referring to history. The metal relief etching entitled Ancient of Days is the work of the leading Romantic artist William Blake. He did a lot of stuff. Okay, this is Goya, Francisco Goya. The sleep of reason produces monsters. So that is an etching and aqua tint. So apparently there's a slight bit of color there. Here we have Goya's Family of Charles the Fourth. Okay, hugely important painting. Goya's 3rd of May. The results of the Spanish resistance to the invasion of their country by Napoleon's forces are highlighted in Goya's painting 3rd of May from 1808. You know, those poor people. How could they compete with, you know, a lineup of soldiers? It's just like, you know, crazy. Okay, this is a painting I've never liked looking at, but again, very important. This is Goya's Saturn devouring one of his children. Gross. Okay, this is Theodore Gericault. We've got another French guy now. Insane woman. I can imagine that. I can see that. Something going on in her brain. Okay, Theodore Gericault, Charging Chasseur. It's like nobody's watching where they're driving to me in this painting. It's funny. But the brushwork and strongly foreshortened figures. Okay, so see how the horse goes back into space. That's foreshortening. We're familiar with that. In Charging Chasseur reflect Gericault's emulation of the earlier painter Rubens, Peter Paul Rubens. Okay, and he picked it up from others before him, for sure. Montaigne, Giotto. Okay, so here is Gericault's Raft of the Medusa. This gigantic painting, look how big it is. 16 by 23. The Raft of the Medusa, with its writhing, tortured bodies, is his commentary on the contemporary socio-cultural situation of slavery. Good thing people were paying attention, because that needed to stop. Okay, here's Delacroix's Death of Sardanapalus. Another really huge, famous painting, 12 by 16 feet. This is a grand pictorial drama. Delacroix's painting Death of Sardanapalus is based on the literary work by the Romantic author Lord Byron. So we're in Romanticism, but still looks nuts. I always think of, like this guy and all of his slave women. Horrible. Okay, Delacroix, Scenes from the Massacre at Chios. And Delacroix's Liberty Leading the People. I don't know why the women always have to have their boobs out, but, it's just a thing in history. See a lot of that with these male artists. So Delacroix's allegorical painting of Liberty Leading the People refers to an uprising that took place in Paris. Okay, so again, symbolic. Remember that an allegory is a story, poem, or picture that can be interpreted to reveal hidden meaning. So typically it's moral or political. And here's Delacroix's tiger hunt. I don't like people hunting tigers. And Delacroix's Women of Algiers in their apartment. So in Women of Algiers, Delacroix's interest in the painting element of color is on display. Okay, can you see that? I mean, I do see color, okay? So that was his primary focus. All right. Francois Roudet. Sorry, I apparently drinking too much ginger ale. So this departure of the volunteers of 1792 is allegorical. It's, the volunteers of 1792, it was created to adorn the Parisian monument, the Arc de Triomphe. Hopefully I'm saying that right as far as I remember. But here it is. Check it out. So here's the Arc de Triomphe. And there we have that allegorical relief sculpture. Everything means something. Caspar David Friedrich, this is German, the European artist who created this romantic, transcendental landscape painting is Caspar David Friedrich. Okay, I don't sound very German, that's okay. Caspar David Friedrich, Wanderer Above the Sea Mist, another one of his important works. And John Constable's The Hay Wain. Okay. Here we get into these big, elaborate landscape paintings. I mean, it's not huge. It's like, 6 feet wide. It's still pretty big. But he's an English painter. He's known for depicting the disappearing beauties of the English countryside during the Industrial Revolution. So, John Constable. So everybody thought, oh dear, when the trains and the machines and all of that smoke, dirty smoke comes into town, we're not going to have all this beautiful scenery. Okay, Joseph Millord William Turner. You'll always see him as J.M.W. Turner. If you go to see his work in a museum. This is the slave ship, so you got to really look closely. The distinctive style that is most recognizable in his use of the painting element is color. So, kind of looks like it's on fire with the sunset, and yeah. Okay, this is another hugely famous painting, Thomas Cole, The Oxbow. The contrast Thomas Cole highlights in his painting The Oxbow is wilderness versus civilization. Okay, so here comes civilization. Oh, it's like a storm, and it's all smoky and dirty. And then here's wilderness. So the Oxbow is a famous river that everyone would have recognized from this area. The artist who was the most prominent member of the Hudson River School of landscape painting is Cole. So the Hudson River School, big group. Okay, here's Albert Bierstadt. And he was a 19th century artist, so 1800s, who painted dramatic landscapes of western areas of the United States, such as Yosemite. This isn't necessarily Yosemite, but this is the Sierra Nevada mountains, but that was his usual thing, Yosemite. Okay, Frederick Edwin Church, Twilight in the Wilderness. Beautiful. So, big landscapes. Okay, now we're getting into socio-political symbolism again. Gustave Courbet, The Stonebreakers. Courbet employed a palette of dirty browns and grays in The Stonebreakers to convey the dismal nature of manual labor. Okay, so people, come on. You got to be educated to get up out of the dirty labor, right? We don't want to dig ditches. Salon jurors regarded Courbet's depiction of the rural poor in The Stonebreakers as socialistic. Socialism is an economic and political system. It states that the means of making, moving, and trading wealth should be owned or controlled by the workers. Doesn't that seem like not such a bad thing? But it was at the time. I don't know, socialists. This means the money made belongs to the workers who make the products instead of the private owners, which are the ones who always made all the money. Okay, Gustave Courbet, Burial at Ornans. The leading figure in the Realist movement in art is Courbet. The artist who was a leader in the French Realist movement in the 19th century is Gustave Courbet. The aspect that Courbet's Burial at Ornans that most resembles traditional history paintings is the monumental size of the painting. So 21, almost 22 feet across, 10 feet high. Big one. Okay, the Gleaners. I know in my art history classes we always talked about this artwork as so important to showing what, the poor had to do. So these ladies they're getting any little leftover wheat or corn, and they always had somebody watching them to make sure they didn't do anything that they shouldn't be doing, which is crazy because it's like, I don't know, do you see much on the ground? Wow, they're really like getting the scraps. Sad. Okay, Honoré Daumier. Well, I guess we know what's happening here. That is somebody who really tied one on. Here we have Honoré Daumier's third-class carriage. So we're getting to see what's going on with the people who were less than fortunate, which was important to realism. Hey, Rosa Bonheur. Ooh, this is such a famous painting. Almost 17, well, a little more than 16 and a half feet across. The Horse Fair. Although possessing the realistic passion for accuracy, Rosa Bonheur did not use this technique to portray political themes. So what's going on here is that during a horse fair, the owners of the horses would kind of parade around in a circle, and then the people who were able to buy horses would like bid on them. And gosh, she was wonderful. Okay, Jean-Baptiste Carpeaux, Ugolino and his children. This really looks like hierarchy of scale and so many things that we've seen in the past. The realism in marble. Crazy. Okay, Jean-Baptiste Carpeaux again. This one's called The Dance. Relief sculpture. So it's not sculpture in the round because it's just coming forth into space, not completely. If it's in the round, then we can walk all the way around it. Oh, this painting. Oh my gosh. Wow, big controversy. Okay, so this is Manet. You got to remember Manet is before Monet. Le déjeuner sur l'herbe, luncheon on the grass. Can you imagine? Oh, these guys. God. The work by Manet that art historians regard as his critique of European painting, since the Renaissance is luncheon on the grass. So much going on there. Okay, this is Manet's Olympia, another hugely controversial painting. It's loosely based on Titian's Venus of Urbino from the Renaissance, but this is a lady of the evening. You know, she's offering her wares here, and goodness gravy, wow. Okay, this is Bouguereau Nymphs and a Satyr, so again, going back to mythology. And Wilhelm Liebel's Three Women in a Village Church. Okay, so back to looking at what real people were doing at the time, but this is in Germany. Okay, this is Wenzel Homer, Veteran in a New Field. This was a political statement, believe it or not. So Wenzel Homer's Veteran in a New Field is a commentary on the aftermath of the American Civil War. The contemporary event that is referenced by American realist Wenzel Homer and his Veteran in a Field is the American Civil War. So just picking up the weeds, like picking up people off the land and all of those deaths. Okay, this is Eakins, The Gross Clinic. Art historians believe that the American artist Thomas Eakins modeled the Gross Clinic on Rembrandt's anatomy lesson of Dr. Nicholas Tuyp. I think it's Tuyp. T-U-Y-P. The American realist who, having studied both painting and medicine, believed that careful observation was a prerequisite for his art is Thomas Eakins. Interesting. And John Singer Sargent, The Daughters of Edward Darley Boyd. Sorry, struggling with my voice today. Okay, so Sargent, his technique of applying paint in thin layers, reflects the influence on him from the earlier work Las Meninas by Velázquez. Okay, so they call it glazing, and they just like mix a little bit of paint with some kind of glazing medium. I mean, it depends on what kind of paint you're using. But just layers and layers and layers and layers, and kind of brings the figures forward. Very time consuming though. Okay, so John Singer Sargent's The Daughters of Edward of Darley Boyd reveals his admiration for the earlier artist Velázquez. Like I said. Here's Henry Ossawa Tanner, The Thankful Poor. Again, we're going back to realism. So, The Thankful Poor by Tanner is an example of the typical realist focus on ordinary people. Edmonia Lewis, Forever Free. So we got a marble statue by a woman. Cool beans. John Everett Millais, Ophelia. I have seen quite a few contemporary artists revisit this theme of Ophelia floating in the water with flowers and, in the woods, especially by photographers. And I think that's fascinating, that we're always referring to the past. Okay, this is Rossetti's Beata Beatrix. In Rossetti's Beata Beatrix, the artist included a poppy to commemorate his wife's death. So he's got symbolism. It's always about symbolism. Robert Smirke's St. Mary's. Yeah, we see a lot of references to the past here. And John Nash, Marble Arch again. It's like the Roman Victory Arch again. Okay, Karl Gotthard Langhans. This is Germany, but again, we're getting classical themes, the pediment and the columns, all of that. Okay, Carl Friedrich Schinkel, Altes Museum. This again is in Germany, and classical architecture. Okay, this is Charles Barry and Augustus Welby, Northmore, Pugin. This is the Houses of Parliament. And again, we're seeing elements of the past. So the 19th century revival of historical architectural styles that led Barry and Pugin to rebuild the Houses of Parliament in London is the Neo-Gothic style. So now we're going back to the Gothic era. So we can see that in the pointed arches, right? Richard Upjohn Trinity Church, again, Neo-Gothic, right? Oh, those towering arches. And John Nass Royal Pavilion. Oh, here we've got a different reference to the past. So the Romantic style building that is a conglomeration, combination of Islamic domes, minarets, and screens that has been described as Indian Gothic is the Royal Pavilion in Brighton. So kind of reminds you a little bit of the Taj Mahal, right? So we see the reflection in the reflecting pond and those shapes of India. Charles Garnier. This is the Opera House. A lot of references there. And Henry Labroust. This is the exterior. And the reading room of the Bibliothèque. That is the library. Okay, Jean Augustus Roebling and Washington Roebling. Brooklyn Bridge! Who hasn't been over the Brooklyn Bridge? I've been over it many times. And it's just so weird that here it was built in the 1800s. Okay, and this is Decimus Burton and Richard Turner's Palm House. This reminds me of the building coming up. So this is the Crystal Palace by Joseph Paxton that was made during the Great Exhibition of 1851. So kind of like a precursor to the World's Fair. When Paxton was constructing the Crystal Palace for the Great Exhibition of 1851, the cost-effective innovation Joseph Paxton employed is prefabricated elements. So he would order like pieces of put together kind of like a, like a prefab house. All you got to do is put it together like a kit. It's still cool though, Crystal Palace. Here we go. Now we're in photography. Okay, so Louis Jacques Mandé Daguerre. Okay, so guess what he invented? The daguerreotype. So daguerreotype was really quite a long process. I mean, you can look into it in the text, but it's just amazing that he was able to capture an image of his studio and what he had in his studio. And Josiah Johnson Hawes and Albert Sands Southward. Early operation under ether. So they just had her like smelling poison basically, and then they operated on her. But hey, early photography, right? Okay, so Honoré Daumier is commenting on Nadar. So Nadar was a famous photographer of the time. This one he's raising photography into art. Look at his camera. And he's got to ride on a balloon. But this is a lithograph. Oops, I forgot to tell you something about that. The medium in which satirical artist Honoré Daumier created most of his works is lithography. So lithography is a process of printing from a flat surface as so to repel the ink except where it is required for printing. So just the parts that you wanted would show up. And this is Nader's portrait of Eugene Delacroix. Remember Death of Sardanapalus? Or Sardanapalus? Oh my gosh. And there he is. And look at him with his, his hand under his jacket like Napoleon. Wow. Guess he thought highly of himself. Most men did. Okay, Julia Margaret Cameron, Ophelia. So she would create these soft, motion blurred images. So photography based on heroines from the past, and so beautiful. Always, her pictures always had a story. Timothy O'Sullivan, A Harvest of Death. Okay, so this is all about the aftermath of the Civil War, and Timothy O'Sullivan was the photographer. But let me just tell you that I know that he was supposed to be creating documentary images, but don't believe that he didn't like move things around to get a good composition, because anything was okay then in the news. Muybridge. Okay, Edward. I always say Edward. Muybridge. The horse galloping. So the instrument that Muybridge used to project a sequence of images onto a screen is a praxiscope. It's just kind of like a rotating wheel of slides. And what he wanted to demonstrate here is that actually, when a horse is running, all 4 feet leave the ground, because nobody would believe that. How is that possible? How could all 4 of the horse's feet leave the ground? But he showed it. And here we've got a definition of the sublime awe mixed with terror. Crazy. And interesting notes. And then here's our discussion questions. Great ideas if you want to dig into one of those for your paper. Okay, that's it.